This evening, we are going to speak about Abram's faith. Abram's faith is very special because he was Paul or Shaul's hero of faith. Romans 4, verses 1 to 5. Then what should we say? Abram, our forefather, obtained by his own efforts. For if Abram came to be considered righteous by Elohim because of legalistic observances, then he has something to boast about. But this is now not how it is before Elohim. So, for what does the Tanakh say? Avram put his trust in Elohim, and it was credited to his account as righteousness. Now the account of someone who is working is credited not on the ground of grace, but on the ground of what is owed him. However, in the case of one who is not working, but rather is trusting in him who makes ungodly people righteous, his trust is credited to him as righteousness. So Abram had no reason to boast. His works did not make him righteous. However, he really was righteous, which means that his works were righteous, but did not make him righteous. And this is a big difference, because Abraham's faith was reckoned to him as righteousness. And his faith created righteousness in him. And therefore it's important to explore Abraham's faith, because Abraham's faith was credited to him as righteousness. Elohim justifies the ungodly. He creates righteousness in people by faith. Abraham's faith consisted of listening to Elohim's voice, obeying it, and Elohim created righteousness in him by his faith. Then Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And he passed in front of Moshe, proclaiming, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, El, compassionate and gracious Elohim, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. The question then is, what is righteousness? And we need to define this accurately to understand what Abram was about. Righteousness is actually expressed as the attributes of God. And when God passes before Moses, he mentions all these attributes. And this means that a righteous person is someone who can show these attributes of God to people so that they will glory in God for those attributes and not glory in the person who is busy demonstrating. So the first two attributes are Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So this is the name of the Most High twice. And the reason it is here twice is because Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is the name that is associated with him as judge. And he judges twice. He judges once at the beginning at creation. And this is at the Feast of Yom Teruah. Because Yom Teruah is the remembrance of the creation of man, where he judged without compassion on sin, and he brought death as a result of sin. The second, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, is him as judge again, but this time with compassion. And he judges with compassion when Yeshua enters behind the drape with the blood of goats and steers to atone. So this is atonement then. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And then he is El, which expresses his name. It is his title rather than his name that is expressed here. And you will see that it actually reads Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, compassionate and gracious Elohim. But in the original Hebrew, it is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, El. Compassionate and gracious. And his compassionate nature shows out of the fact that compassion is known as rachum. And this is related to the word which is rechem, which is a uterus. And this means that he is compassionate as a mother is to a child, as God, and that he is gracious, that he shows grace to everyone. And people who are truly righteous show compassion and grace to people. They are slow to anger. God himself is slow to anger. So this means that they are patient. They abound in love. And one doesn't need to say much about that. But people who are compassionate, who are righteous, abound in love. And they also abound in faithfulness. So their word is their word, as God's word is his word. Whatever he promises, he does. Maintaining love to thousands. Those who love him, he maintains his love for long periods of time and also over many generations. And he forgives wickedness, where wickedness are those sins that are done wittingly. So knowingly people continue to sin. And where this rebellion that is written here is defined as rebellion and sin. And the sins that are committed here means sins that are committed, yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. Yes, for those who ask forgiveness, he forgives wickedness, rebellion, and sin. And those people then become guiltless because they have asked for forgiveness. But he does not leave the guilty unpunished. So those who do not ask for forgiveness, he does not leave unpunished. And he punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and the fourth generation. What happens here is that there are things that run within families where people keep on sinning the same as the sins of their fathers and their mothers. And somewhere in the third or the fourth generation, someone realizes that this is wrong and turns on that sin. Then he can then turn the whole process around for himself and that part of the family that chooses to do so. So, what is compassion? What is righteousness? It is Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, judging without compassion and judging with atonement. El, he's God, he's compassionate, he's gracious, he's slow to anger, he's abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation.
My question is that if Abraham was a righteous person, does it mean that he did not get angry in any way? He was just having this, just like God himself, the attributes, the whole attributes of God.
No, that's not what it means. What it means is that Abraham lived in the presence of God, and most of the time he did exactly what he needed to do. But when he sinned, he acknowledged it immediately and he asked forgiveness immediately. Because you can then be forgiven. If you don't ask forgiveness, you can't be forgiven. Okay, because Adam and Eve did not acknowledge their sin.
Each time you go wrong and immediately you ask for forgiveness, then you remain righteous.
Yes, because when you do something wrong, you're unrighteous. When you do sin, you're a sinner. But the minute you ask forgiveness, he says that he forgives the wickedness, rebellion, and sin. If I acknowledge that I have done wrong, people can forgive, and God also forgives. But if you do not acknowledge that you've done wrong, it is a problem. It's a two-way street, because he has the ability to not forgive me. But if he does not forgive me, he also is not forgiven. Yeah, but it must be true, because you see, there are a lot of people who ask, they say, sorry, I did this, but they don't really mean it. That is not righteousness. Righteousness means humbling yourself and acknowledging that you have done wrong. It's not a window dressing thing. It must be real. What actually happens here, it is you who, as you hear from the Spirit, what you're doing is wrong. Then you stop just there and you say, I have done wrong. Please forgive me. And then he actually should say to you, I forgive you. Because forgiveness is expensive. Forgiveness has the price of death. When I forgive someone, I have to die to my right to have retribution. The minute I acknowledge that I have done something wrong, God knows what's in my heart, and he knows whether I'm being true. It does not matter what the other person does. It matters that God has heard that I have asked. I cannot ask God forgiveness if I have sinned against someone else.
Actually looks into our heart. It's true that when you are saying that you've forgiven a person, but deep down, you know that it was only just embracing forgiveness. That's not what God is actually the thing all about. He actually is, he actually punishes those that are wickedness and those actually that rebels, you see, and pretending as if maybe they've forgiven a person.
Now Yudhevave said to Avram, get yourself out of your country, away from your kinsmen and away from your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and I will make your name great, and you are to be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, but I will curse anyone who curses you, and by you all the families of the earth will be blessed. So Avram went, as Yudhevave had said to him, and Lot went with him. Avram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Avram took his wife Sarai, his brother's son Lot, and all their possessions which they had accumulated, as well as the people they had acquired in Haran. Then they set out for the land of Canaan and entered the land of Canaan. So what happened here is a rich man, and Yudhevave spoke. Avram heard the voice, he obeyed as he did, and this was counted to him as righteousness. So it means that his faith was listening to the voice, obeying it. Yudhevave promised to bless Abram and his descendants, to make him a witness to the nations, because he will become a great nation, and the great nations that come out of him will be more than his own physical descent, but also his spiritual descent. And he will bless them through him as his witness.
What is a blessing? Is it a blessing? Is it material blessing? Or is it a spiritual blessing? Because we are in a secular world now. So if you are progressing in life, you've got everything, people regard you as a blessed person. And then if you are not progressing, it's like you are not blessed. So actually, what is a blessing?
Now Adonai said to Avram, get yourself out of your country, away from your kinsmen, away from your father's house, and go to the land I will show you, and I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you are to be a blessing. So this means that the blessing of Abraham means that he will become a famous man. And he's very famous, I think you agree. And he is to be a blessing. So he is to bless other people with what he has. And that is with everything he has, with his heart and his soul and with all of his possessions. He is to bless other people as well. And then he says, he will bless those who bless you, and I will curse anyone who curses you. And by you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. The reason that all the families of the earth will be blessed by Abram is because through Abram comes the knowledge that we have to listen to the voice, obey it, and it is counted to us as righteousness. So Avram passed through the land to place called Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. The Canaani were then in the land. Yudhevaveh appeared to Avram and said to him, take your descendants, I will give this land. So he built an altar there to Yudhevaveh, who had appeared to him. He left that place, went to the hill east of Bethel, and pitched his tent. With Bethel to the west and Ai to the east, he built an altar there and called on the name of Yudhevaveh. Then Avram traveled on, continuing towards the Negev. So Yudhevaveh, because of this faithfulness and because of Avram's faith, appeared to Avram and made him a promise about the future of the land and about the continued ownership of the land. Then Avram built an altar. And obviously he built this altar to bring sacrifice. And sacrifice means dying to self and sin and one's own works and being resurrected to righteousness by dying to sin and unrighteousness into the righteousness that God himself creates in us. Now this faith of Avram was then later asked of Israel again, because it says Shema Israel, Yudhevaveh Eloheinu, Yudhevaveh Echad, hear Israel, Yudhevaveh our Elohim, Yudhevaveh is one. And you are to love Yudhevaveh, your Elohim, with all your heart, all your being, and all your resources. These words which I am ordering you today are to be on your heart, and you to teach them carefully to your children. You are to talk about them when you sit at home, when you are traveling on the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. So the confession is to hear the voice. Shema means to hear and to do. So that actually is exactly what Abram did. He heard the voice and did. What did he do? John 14:15 says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And this is clearly what the commandment is, to love him with all your heart, all your being, and all your resources. So that means, this love means keeping the law with all of our heart, with all our being, and all of our resources. And it must be written in the heart. So there's only one way that the commands can be in one's heart, and that is that they are written by Ruach HaKodesh. So it must be in the heart, which is through the Ruach, and one is to teach the children carefully, contextually, with preparedness for the gospel. When you sit up at home and when you are going, when you lie down and when you get up. And one would obviously speak about sitting at home, lying down, getting up, and traveling as these different things become important. And that means that it will be taught contextually, as the Ruach will also teach us. And these children to whom it is to be taught contextually with preparedness for the gospel include those children who are actually not physical children, but new believers, and by manner of speaking, those who come in from the nations. Romans 4:6-9, David says the same thing when he speaks of the blessedness of the one to whom Elohim credits righteousness apart from works. Blessed are those whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered. Blessed is the one whose sin Yudhevaveh will never count against them. Is this blessedness only for the circumcised, or also for the uncircumcised? We have been saying that Abram's faith was credited him to righteousness. Under what circumstances was it credited? Before he was circumcised, or after he was circumcised, or before? It was not after, but before, as Abram. And he received circumcision as a sign, a seal of the righteousness that he had by faith when he was still uncircumcised. So then, he is the father of all who believe, but have not been circumcised, in order that righteousness might be credited to them. So those who will believe as Abraham believed, that they will believe in two ways. First, by hearing the voice, obeying it, and having it credited to righteousness, of hearing God speak, of trusting him that what he promises he will do. And he's also the father of the uncircumcised. So he's also the father of the uncircumcised, because they hear and do, and it's counted to them as righteousness, and because they hear and trust what the Father has said he will do, and in that way they also then become righteous. And he's then also the father of the circumcised, who not only are circumcised, but who also follow in the footsteps of the faith that our father Abraham had before he was circumcised. So Abraham was justified without circumcision, the father of the faith, and also the father of those who are uncircumcised. But the circumcised are also to have the same faith as Abraham. For the promise to Abraham and to his seed that he would inherit the world did not come through legalism, but through the righteousness that trust produces. For if the heirs are produced by legalism, then trust is pointless and the promise worthless. For what the law brings is punishment, and where there is no law, there is also no violation. The reason the promise is based on trusting is so that it may come as Elohim's free gift, a promise that can be relied on by all the seed, not only those who lie within the framework of the Torah, but also those with the kind of trust Avraham had. Avraham Avinu, Avraham, our father, for all of us. So this means that this trusting, actually hearing the voice, obeying it, so that it will become righteousness, hearing the voice and trusting that the promises are true, also are counted to righteousness and are the same part of the same coin, just the two faces thereof. For the promise to Avram and his seed that he would inherit the world did not come through legalism. So he inherits the world, the earth. But this world, with the word for earth and the word for Israel is actually the same word. So it is Eretz, which is the land of Israel, but also the earth. And that's this is as a result of the attributed righteousness that comes through the faith of Abraham.
I'd like to comment that, the promises that the Lord gave to Abraham, they didn't materialize like within a short space of time. I mean, if you look into this thing, it looks like the promise was made 20 years before, or more than 25 years before. So, but Abraham was faithful that even though he's very old, he was getting older, but he still believed that the Lord will commit to his promises.
Yeah, I think, again, this teaching right now, it teaches us to exercise patience.
Yes.
And obviously, patience pays. So it means now we have to be like gardeners. We should be in a know that not all seasons are growing seasons. So Abraham's faith teaches us that one has to be patient no matter how long, but victory setting.
This accords with the Tanakh, where it says, I have appointed you to be father to many nations. Abraham is our father in Elohim's sight, because he trusted Elohim as the one who gives life to the dead and calls non-existent things into existence. Now, life to the dead is when he comes and takes away sin and unrighteousness. And then the second facet of faith, which is he calls non-existent things into existence to prove his faithfulness. For he was past hope Abram, yet in hope he trusted that he would indeed become a father to many nations in keeping with what he had been told. So many will your seed be. His trust did not waver when he considered his own body, which was as good as dead, since he was about 100 years old, and when he considered that Sarah's womb was dead too. So he was promised to become the father of many nations, and he trusted Elohim, who gives life to the dead, who resurrects those who are in sin and unrighteousness to sinlessness and righteousness. But also he and Sarah were both dead. So this death that was in them meant that they could not have children at a physical level. But he trusted Elohim that he would get both physical and spiritual descendants. He did not by lack of trust side against Elohim's promises. On the contrary, by trust he was given power as he gave glory to Elohim. For he was fully convinced that what Elohim had promised, he could also accomplish. This is why it was credited to his account as righteousness. But the words, it was credited to his account, were not written for him only. They were written also for us, who will certainly have our account credited too, because we have trusted in him who raised Yeshua our Adonai, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, from the dead. Yeshua was delivered to death because of our offenses and raised to life in order to make us righteous. So faith that Elohim is trustworthy is counter to righteousness. To trust in a promise. It's also accounted for faith in resurrection. In the resurrection that comes through Yeshua HaMashiach. Because they heard Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh say it. Even faith in Yeshua is because we hear Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh say it. No one can come to faith spontaneously because believing in Yeshua is not the natural thing to do at all. Genesis 12, verse 10 to 14. But there was a famine in the land. So Avram went down into Egypt to stay there because the famine in the land was severe. When he came close to Egypt and was about to enter, he said to Sarai, his wife, "Here now, I know that you're a good-looking woman, so when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and kill me but keep you alive. Please say that you're my sister, so that it will go well with me for your sake, and so that I will stay alive because of you." When Avram entered Egypt, the Egyptians did notice that the woman was very beautiful. So Avram intended to withhold important information. He was lying by omission, but he was righteous. So his righteousness and the way that he lived means that he should have consulted Elohim and probably did consult Elohim. And the question is whether this was advice that came through the Ruach, through the voice that he heard. So Pharaoh's princess saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. So the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. He treated Avram well for her sake, giving him sheep, cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female slaves, and camels. But Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh inflicted great plagues on Pharaoh and his household because of Sarai, Avram's wife. Pharaoh called Avram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife?" Pharaoh should have known. He should have checked his facts. The Pharaohs were known for the fact that they often married their sisters. So he, of all, should have known to ask whether she was not only his sister, but also his wife. Pharaoh is supposed to be a ruler and is supposed to be an intelligent man, because who will travel with a beautiful sister? A sister as beautiful as she was would be married to another man. So all sorts of questions should have arisen. The logical question was whether she was married to him or not. And then Elohim brings the plagues on Pharaoh and not on Abram, because Pharaoh transgressed.
Was he not obliged to give them the information? Okay, he feared for his life. Firstly, I looked at why should he go to Egypt? Why did the Lord permit drought in the area where he lived? So this I took it more on a pragmatic point, on a like that. Even though I am God's child, even though I might be righteous, but I must still be alert for car hijacking. I must be alert for being marked. I must be alert for all that. Even though the Lord is protecting me, but I must still be vigilant on my side.